All right, guys, we are back with another video. Now, before we begin, let's address the elephant in the room. I shaved the old bean. We got rid of the old swoop. It's gone. Why? Why not? It's COVID. I've been trapped in this house for a year. I'm probably going to be trapped here for another 6 months. No one's coming to visit. I'm not visiting anybody else. If I'm ever going to experiment with hair, this is the time to do it. And let me tell you the results. Gentlemen, the impossible is possible. Don't let anybody tell you different. Okay? Did I think it was possible that I could somehow become more attractive? Of course not. Of course not. I had maxed out. There was no way that was going to get better. And then I shaved my head and bang. You can see the results for yourself. All right? It's almost unfair at this point. I'm starting to feel guilty about how good I look. Right? Don't show this video to your wives or to your girlfriends, because I don't want to be held responsible for the consequences of that kind of reckless action within your relationships. Okay? I don't want to have that guilt on me. Okay? So just keep this amongst ourselves, gentlemen. All right? Now, to the point at hand, what is this video about? Skadoosh. How to be a seller. Important. It's trade deadline time. There's a lot of sellers out there. So I'm going to give you guys some wisdom, some advice on how to be a seller. Now, I know what you're thinking. Norm, you hardly make any trades anymore, right? And your offers are so notoriously bad that they have nicknamed you Lowball Norm. And I hear what you're saying. I get what you're saying. You're not without a point there. Okay? But first of all, I will point out that there is an old adage: those who can do, those who can't teach. So allow me to teach, if I may. Okay? And listen, just because the level to which I apply my own theory is questionable doesn't mean that I don't have good ideas. So hang in there with me and listen. Now, what motivated me to do this video? You all know I'm an incredibly lazy person. I don't want to do a video. But I was forced to by a tweet from none other than my good friend, Matt from the Norseman, where he wrote, and I quote, "It is shocking. Shocking. So prepare yourselves. If there's children in the room, best to have them leave the room." Okay? He wrote in public on Twitter, "Not gonna try to convince you expensive fourth line flotsam is something better. Let's make a deal." I cannot think of a statement more antithetical to my personal philosophy. I mean, it's like a dagger to the heart, right? A dagger to the heart, sir. It's so wrong. It's so fundamentally wrong that I'm convinced this might be why you're in last place. I didn't want to go there. But I think that these aren't uncorrelated. Okay? Now, I want to help you guys. I want to talk about how to be a seller. Now, when you're selling, okay, especially at the deadline, okay, it's true all the time, but especially at the deadline, okay, 3 questions you need to ask. Number 1, who are you selling? Number 2, who are you selling to? Number 3, and most importantly, how am I going to sell it? All right, first question, who are you selling? Okay, seems like an obvious thing, right? You want to have guys you have to identify which guys have a current value that outweighs their future utility. Okay? So if you have a guy whose usefulness to you is less than the potential return you can get on a trade from him, then that guy could potentially be traded. Now, you're thinking, thank you, another great study from the University of Duh, right? But go take a look at the transaction page and take a closer look at those rosters and take a look at those deals. And you tell me that every single one of those deals follows this, because they don't. Go look. Okay? So some people need to hear these are fundamentals. This is like dribbling in basketball, baby. This is the fundamentals I'm trying to teach right here. Okay? Now, what does this mean in terms of identifying? It depends on your team and your situation, right? If you're a team that's doing really, really well and you're a lock for the playoffs, right? Then maybe the guy that you're looking to sell is someone who's on your 3rd or 4th line, or maybe he's in your minors or sitting on your bench, who in all likelihood isn't going to make a huge impact on your roster, And, even going forward, he's probably not going to either make your roster or he's not going to be a significant portion of your roster, but he's still a good player. He's only in that position because the rest of your team is so good, right? So he's still a good player. So maybe on another team, he's a second line guy playing power play minutes, right? In that case, his utility to you is low, but his value to someone else could be potentially high. And so that's a guy that you want to try and sell, even though you're in a dominant position, right? Now, if you're a team that stinks, it's even easier, right? If you're not going to make the playoffs and you're thinking about the future and your whole roster is full of either young guys and or guys who suck, right? And you've got a UFA who's not terrible, then of course, obviously, you're going to try and trade that to a playoff guy because utility to you is nothing because you don't even want to win. You want a higher draft position. So his utility to you is zero almost. But his utility to someone who's going into the playoffs could be very significant depending on the guy, right? So again, that's what you do. Maybe it's also a duplication issue, right? You've got two goalies who are basically number one rated, okay? So that second number one goalie has utility to you as like a backup and as injury relief and insurance, But ultimately, if you have another need to address, like if you need a top defenseman, and that's going to have more utility to your team, and you're able, then maybe selling that guy makes sense, right? Maybe that's a guy you got to identify and sell because it's a redundancy that you can turn into an advantage for yourself, right? Same thing if you've got three really good centers and nobody on the wing, garbage on the wings, right? Translate one of those centers into a winger, win-win, right? Excellent. Now, who are you selling to? Again, you're thinking this is obvious, but it isn't always, right? You need to try and find a guy. Okay, now that you know, okay, this is the guy that I'm selling. Now you need to find, okay, what team needs this guy the most? Or at least, who can I convince needs this guy the most? That's coming up. That's part 3. That's a little sneak preview. We're not there yet, okay? Let's just talk about in practical terms right now. Who needs this guy the most, right? If I've got a UFA defenseman, and I'm a terrible team, and so I just want to get rid of him, okay? Am I going to sell that to... I'm certainly not going to sell that to another team who's not planning on making the playoffs because they've got no value to them as well, right? I could sell that to a playoff team, but which playoff team do I want to sell it to? You want to look and see who's the weakest on defense, whether because of injuries or because they just don't have good defensemen. Who needs this guy the most relative to his assets, right? Maybe a guy needs him really, really badly, but he's got no picks left. He's traded all of his picks. He hasn't got a whole lot of young guys. So there's not much that you want from that roster in return, and B, he's going to be less willing to give it up, even for a guy he desperately needs because he hasn't got that surplus. But if you've got a guy who's sitting on 5 first-round picks, getting a first-round pick out of him for a UFA is potentially possible because because of his situations. You really, really, really need to do your research, and most importantly, when you're talking about who you're selling to, is you need to look beyond just looking at his roster and making assumptions, okay? We have social media now. Everyone's got Twitter accounts. Everyone's got, writing articles. They're doing all these things. They're making comments. You can see, you can look, and if you do the research, you should know what every GM wants to do with their team, right? If you look just straight at the numbers at my team, right? We're kind of like fighting for a playoff spot. We've got a decent roster. We've got a good number one, even though he's injured. That's a whole. We'll get into that. But I've got an okay team. You know what I mean? I got a good forward group, right? So you're thinking, okay, well, he might want to buy up a UFA, right? That would be an obvious target for someone if you're trying to sell off a UFA, right? Because I want to make a boost to get into the playoffs, right? But if you were paying attention to literally anything I've written in the last year, you know that I'm not looking at playoff success. I mean, I'll take it if I get it, but that's not the goal for this year. So if you try to sell me a UFA defenseman, I'm not going to give up a pick to get a UFA defenseman because I want my picks. That's what's most important to me, more important than playoff success, right? So you need to really, really do your research and find out, what do GMs want, right? What are they panicked about right now? That's the best. What are they panicked about, right? And then if you can do something to alleviate that panic, that anxiety, you're going to get more out of them. Okay, so who you're selling to, important. Do your research. Okay, third and most important, I cannot stress to you how important this is. How are you going to sell this asset? Right? If you're like just like, oh, I got this guy and he's got this value, and I see this other guy in this other team, he's got this value, that's about the same. Let's see if we can make a deal. Then you're a chump. You're a fool. You're doing it wrong. Okay? That's not the goal. The asset in question is almost secondary, as far as I'm concerned, to how you're going to sell them. Okay? Okay, this might be a controversial statement, but the objective truth of the value of a player is not important at all. I don't care if the player that I'm selling is actually going to help you. I care about whether I can convince you that he is going to help you. Right? Whether that's true or not, I don't care. I don't care. My goal, my sole goal as a GM is to maximize returns, to make my team better. That's it. That's it. So when I see the fairness doctrine passed around, nothing makes me angry, right? So I take a look at Matt's tweet. I'm not going to convince you fourth line Flotsam is something better. Let's make a deal. No, that is wrong. It's wrong. You should be convincing people that your fourth line Flotsam is something better, because that's how you're going to maximize value of return. Okay, I have said this before, so all you veterans who have heard this rant before can just roll your eyes and turn the volume down. But for everyone who hasn't, fair deals are not the objective of a trade negotiation. Okay? When I make a fair deal, that is a defeat. That's me admitting defeat. The fair deal should be your last resort. Okay? For me, if I make a fair deal, that just means that I failed to maximize value on that asset that I'm trading. Period. That's it. Right? So if you go into a negotiation with the intention of like, listen, I want to try and find an asset that I have that's going to genuinely help the other GM so that I can get an asset of equal value that's going to help me. And kumbaya, we're going to hold hands and run into the sunset, both being satisfied with that deal. No. What you need to do is you need to say, how am I going to sell this guy on what I'm selling in a way that he's going to give up too much to get him? That's it. That's your goal. And if you can't listen, and if you've got two smart GMs, and this is usually the case because the GMs in this league are smart. I mean, really, realistically, certainly in terms of hockey, smarter than I am. Let's be honest, for the most part. So, if you've got two smart GMs and one GM is trying to maximize value for them and the other GM is trying to maximize value for themselves, everyone's trying to maximize value for themselves, then what's going to happen? No one's going to be able to pull the road, no one's going to be able to convince the other one to overpay, and so they're both forced into a position where they have to do a fair deal. But for both GMs, that is a last resort. Right? That's what I mean. To me, it's like if I get a fair deal, it's like fair play to you, sir. Well done. You know what I mean? We have a gentlemanly handshake about it, and then smoke a cigar or whatever gentlemen do. All right. There's no joy in it, but it's kind of like, okay, well, you know what? That's where we wind up getting to, whatever. And again, you can both walk away from that with an asset that's better for your team. You can both have won the trade on an objective level in terms of making your team better, and it be fair. Those deals exist, but that's not the goal. That's the last resort. Okay. Now, let's take a look at this in practice, because it's going to make a little more sense maybe in practice with examples. So I'll give you two examples, an easy example and a difficult example. Both examples obviously coming from the greatest team, the Philadelphia Fire Ants. A, because I know more about my own guys, and B, because I don't care about the rest of your teams. Let's be honest. Okay? So let's look at an easy one. Chris Tanev. Okay? Who am I selling? Chris Tanev. Why? Why am I selling Chris Tanev? Okay? Because realistically, my playoff hopes are a little sketchy now, especially with Halak injured. I may not even make the playoffs. If I make the playoffs, am I really going to be successful? I mean, Halak will be back by then, but it's an uphill battle. Like my team is not fantastic, right? We've been overperforming as far as I'm concerned. So, so Tanev is a reasonable guy that I can move, right? Because if I don't make the playoffs, or if I don't have a lot of playoff success and I don't trade Tanev, I'm going to get nothing out of him, and it's going to be a waste. But at the same time, he doesn't have zero value because I could still make the playoffs, and if I make the playoffs, having Chris Tanev is going to be critical. If I'm going to have any chance of success, I need to have a guy like a Chris Tanev in there, right? So he doesn't have zero value to me. It's not the same as like someone who's like in last place making that decision, right? But he is a guy that I definitely could look like. If I can get what I want for him, then it makes sense for me to maybe move him. Right? I'm not going to fire sale him, but you could, right? So good. I've identified who I'm selling. Who am I going to sell to? Well, the obvious targets are going to be playoff bound teams, right? Because Chris Tanev is a veteran physical defenseman with a really high defense and, experience and leadership. And he's exactly what you want on your blue line come playoff time. And he's 73 overall. So that puts him on, probably in the top 4 for a lot of teams, most teams, I would think. So he's got good value, right? Other teams, if you're wanting going to playoffs, listen, if you're in the playoffs and I said, here, have Chris Tanev for free, everyone's gonna take him. You can see the obvious value he has, right? So it's a case of, can I get what I want? Can I extract that value? Is the only issue. So when I'm looking at who I'm going to sell to, it's going to be, okay, which guys need defensemen the most, right? Who doesn't have a guy like Chris Tanev on their roster and will want one on his roster, okay? So that's that. Now, how am I going to sell it? I mean, Chris Tanev sells itself. I don't have to do a ton of salesmanship, right? But you can't just say, hey, here's Chris Tanev. Isn't he great? What are you going to give him for me? No, little salesmanship, even for the obvious stuff, doesn't hurt. You can point out he's got a really, really high defensive stat. You can point out he's been simming very well this year, so the sim likes him this year because that's a variable that we have to consider in this league. Right? A lot of the GMs are from the Vancouver area, so you can appeal to, hey, you remember Chris Tanev? Isn't he a great guy? Don't you miss Chris Tanev? Isn't he wonderful? Wouldn't it be great to have him on your team? Right? Anything you can get, any advantage you can get that's going to increase his value is important. So do that. Okay? Now, let's take a look at an example that is less easy. And the obvious one is going to be Yaroslav Halak, who, as of yesterday, is now injured for the next 2 months. So basically, he's done for probably the rest of the season, if not the entire season, the rest of the regular season. He's going to be done for most of the regular season, if not all of it. Right? Not ideal. And he's a UFA, so that's a tougher sell. Right? Now, again, why am I going to sell him? Well, I mean, with him out for the rest of the regular season, the odds that I'm going to make the playoffs are less. I might still make the playoffs, but it's iffy. My position's probably going to be lower, and so I'm going to be playing a better team, right? Number 1, number 2 ranked team. I'm going to be playing like Vegas or Havana or something, right? So which is not great. That doesn't help my odds, And Halak will be back probably for the playoffs, but is that going to be enough, right? So for me, it's like, okay, it makes sense that I'm at least going to... He doesn't have no value because, again, I could still make the playoffs, and if I do, having Halak is going to be critical. So he doesn't have zero... Like Tanev, he doesn't have zero value, but his value... It's not so much his value to me has dropped, but my willingness to sell him has definitely increased, right? I want to look at it. So who am I going to sell him to? I mean, again, the obvious choice is going to be a playoff-bound team, but because he's been injured, it kind of excludes the bubble teams more than it would have if you weren't injured, right? If he wasn't injured and I was just straight up, trying to pitch Halak, I could pitch a guy who's like one or two spots out of a playoff spot and say, listen, this is the guy who's going to get you over that hump. This is the guy who's going to make it for you. He's going to get you into those playoffs and he's going to take you to the promised land, right? But now I can't do that. But I still could sell him to a playoff team that's a lock, right? If you know you're going to make the playoffs, if like there's very little doubt that you're going to make the playoffs, then you could sell Halak. You could say, listen, like he's out for the rest of the season, but he'll be there for the playoffs, right? He's going to be there for the playoffs. And not just that, but here's the you take his weakest point and you make it a positive, right? The weakest point on Halak right now is that he's injured. He's very badly injured right now. So it's like that's a negative selling point. Maybe don't mention it. No. I'm going to mention it. I'm going to turn it into a positive, baby. Right? If you're a playoff team and you pick up Halak, because he's injured for the rest of the regular season, he's not going to get another late season injury that's going to bleed into the playoffs. Right? Come playoff times, he's going to be fresh off injury. So you know for sure when you start the playoffs, you're going to have Halak there. Right? As opposed to you get some other goalie and then 2 weeks before the playoffs, he winds up, out for 3 months and now you're screwed. Right? You know for the playoffs, you are going to have Halak. Right? That's a selling point. Okay? Now, you're thinking, but surely that's the extent of who you're going to be able to sell it to, right? You're not going to be able to sell it to someone who's not making the playoffs. Why would they want to pick up a UFA goalie who's going to be injured for the rest of the regular season? They can't help them at all. Well, that's where you're wrong. That's why you got to be creative about how you're going to sell a player, right? Because I could sell Halak to a basement-dwelling team. Okay? You're at the bottom of the league. Okay? You're in like Henry territory, all right? You're down there, right? And you're not going to make the playoffs. You don't, right? So you don't, so getting a UFA is pointless, right? No, it's not. If I look at a team and I see the team has, they stink, they're no good, but they've got no UFA that they can make a franchise player that's any good. No one impactful that they could use their franchise player tag. Then here's my selling point. My selling point is, look, you trade me an asset to get Halak. Okay? Because you've picked him up by the deadline, you're able to use your franchise player tag on him. You use your franchise player tag him out on the offseason. He's going to re-rate just as good, if not better. He's doing well in the NHL this year. Again, he's consistently very good, Halak. Right? So, and really, I mean, he's an injury to Rask away from taking over number one spot in Boston, right? So, right, like, you sell it, right? So now you've got locked in for X number of years, however long you want to make that franchise player valid. You've now got a goalie who you could legit use as your number one goalie, right? That's an obvious value to them. And more importantly, it's good because he's injured. Again, how you sell it. You take the negatives and you spin them into positives. Because he's injured, he's not going to win any games for you because he can't play. Right? So if you're second or third last team in the league and you're worried about, you don't want to mess up your draft position, you want to maximize your chances to get that number one pick overall, Halak's not going to do that for you. So you get the opportunity to pick up a good player who you can franchise, but who isn't going to win you games, which is important if you're trying to tank. Right? If Halak wasn't injured and I'm trying to pitch that to them, they're like, yeah, but he might play and he's going to win some games for me and I don't want to win games, so I don't want Halak. But when he's injured, he's almost got more value injured than he would if he's not injured if you're a last place team. Right? See what I did? See what I did there? Now, is any of that accurate or is any of that true? I don't know. Maybe. Is that guy going to make your team better? Who knows? I don't know. I don't care is the point. I don't care. The point is I am going to try to convince you that his value is as high as I can so that I can maximize my return. And that's what everyone should be doing. So if someone tells you that they're trying to be honest and they want to pitch you a fair deal, they're either lying or dumb, because that's not, listen, when someone comes to me with a deal, if it's fair, I'm suspicious. I'm suspicious. It's like, well, hang on. How am I losing here? What's going on? And that's what you guys should be too. Everyone should be fighting to get the best deal for their team, irregardless of the objective truth of the universe. Now, am I saying lie? No. I'm not saying be dishonest. Well, I mean, in that sense, I'm not saying outright lie. Like, don't say he's having an amazing season in the NHL and he's not. I mean, you could try and convince him that the season in the NHL is better than it maybe is on the stats or whatever. But, you can't just outright lie to a guy, right? You can't pitch a guy who's got like a one-way contract and like not and like intentionally kind of conceal the fact that he's got a one-way contract, hoping the other guy isn't going to notice, and that's going to change his, his opinion on it, right? Like, you don't want to be dishonest. But salesmanship, little razzle dazzle, right? That's what you got to do in order to make your team better. So if you have fourth line flotsam, you need to sell that fourth line flotsam as third line gold. And if the other GM doesn't buy it and they're not, and they're seeing through it, or you're not able to convince them, well, listen, then you might have to trade him as fourth line flotsam, and you get a fair deal for it, and there you go. But that's the losing position. The winning position is selling high, right? Maximizing value. That's the winning position. Don't make fair trades, make good trades. And that's the lesson that I have for you. The morals of which you can determine, go talk to your priest and see what they say. Okay? But for me, that's my attitude. Now, am I screwing myself a little bit in terms of the deals that I'm going to try and make leading up to the playoff? Maybe I am. Yes, maybe I am. But this is guys, this is what I'm saying. As I'm sure you all know, I have a long-standing reputation as the most generous, the most caring, the most giving GM in the league. Selfless, humble. Right? You all know this. So this is my gift to you guys. My trade deadline gift is insight into how you can do better, how you can make your teams better, how you can make better deals, how you can better spot people who are trying to pull one over on you to make a better deal for themselves, to defend yourself against the exact kind of tactics I'm going to use on all of you in the next coming weeks. All right, that's it. I'm going to wrap it up here. I will do more videos. Hopefully someone got some use out of this. Please feel free to, clap at me on Twitter if you disagree with what I'm saying. If you want to try and defend the fair deal position, have at it. You're wrong and you'll lose, but feel free to defend that position. And hopefully you all have a successful deadline. Well, actually, no, I don't wish you have a successful deadline. I hope I have a successful deadline, and I hope that my success at the deadline comes at your detriment. But it's nothing personal. You know I love you guys. All right, that's it. I'm done. Goodbye. Stay safe. Bye.